Dusk approached with me as I neared the grumpy village. I'd already decided that it was a bad idea to arrive atop Talus, owing to his appearance. A hatred of monsters was about the only thing the towns in the savannah could agree on. So, I found a spot on Welcome Peak where the residents wouldn't blindly wander into him. Under cover of dark, I made my way into town. In the crisp morning, I hailed Abranus. There was no sales pitch. I simply wanted to give him some of the bread I'd hopefully one day sell at the Hoof and Udder. No one knew about my bakery and tavern, so I was trying to spread the word, but he refused to accept it, telling me that they had all the food they needed, gesturing at the bales of hay, which looked a little damp and forgotten about. Knowing Abranus would only turn more stubborn at the slightest provocation or annoyance, I tried my best to hide my disappointment. Borg might be more reasonable than Abranus, I thought, but I was determined, and went back to talk to the old smith. He was in the smithy lecturing Fergus, although it was Fergus who I heard first.
Abranus, you told me the same thing yesterday.
50 years old and you forge an iron axe like you're still figuring it out. What would grandfather say?
I can't concentrate with you breathing down my neck. I barely got any sleep with that hideous noise from the mountain. You might have heard it too, if anything but your own snores woke you.
I might have some idea what Fergus was talking about.
You whinging and you crying, making excuses like you always have.
You know what? Why don't you just...
Abranus, about that bread. Probably not the best idea I'd ever had to interrupt, because Abranus was almost as fiery as his forge at that moment.
We don't want your charity. And now you're turning down free food. Give it here.
I decided to overlook that Fergus had accepted my bread out of spite and handed over a loaf. I thought Abranus was about to wrestle the bread off Fergus.
We are perfectly able of making our own food. Give that back.
It took a moment for Fergus to respond with his mouth full.
We haven't had a farmer, let alone a cook, living here for almost a decade. Those old composters are just degrading out there in the rain. Now give me another. I've been worked to the bone and I'm hungry.
Two-Bone growled at Fergus as he greedily extended his hand. I gave him two, and told Abranus bluntly that he can pay for it if he likes, but I'd much prefer if he'd just tell people where it came from. Abranus accepted, and I dished out the remainder of the Grumpy Village's gift from my stockpile, as the two of them argued. I'm sure they'll share it out fairly. Apart from advertising my fledgling enterprise, I was also visiting the villages of the savannah to offer my services as a builder. Abranus said I had a knack for it, and I was eager to practice. The villages in the area were barely able to maintain their own structures, let alone erect more. Helping them was no skin off my nose. I was thinking about what I could build next as I gathered wood, but stopped when I saw two Endermen on the outskirts of town. There was an uneasy aura emanating from the standoff. Were they arguing? I tried to keep out of sight. Two-Bone was agitated and couldn't help himself. The Endermen turned towards his bark. The closest one acted first and moved towards me. In a momentary flash, I recognised Guest, who stood between me and the other Enderman. The aura the Enderman were emitting had turned from uneasiness to an awful feeling of fear and despair. It looked like Guest was avoiding facing the other, but perhaps was tricked into locking gazes. The aura of intense emotions crescendoed in a moment that seemed to last an age. With one final push from Guest, the farthest Enderman slinked away, but in his exhaustion, Guest was unable to explain what had happened, although he may not have had time anyway, because I was chased away by a pair of phantoms that approached from the direction the other Enderman had left. I was missing the cats. Under the circumstances, I turned in for the night. Fergus had said he hadn't slept well again and was rivaling his older brother's grumpiness. Whatever kindness he had shown me before was all but gone, including any appetite he had for my bread. Abranus always got good sleep and was receptive when I talked to him about wanting to do further construction projects here. His willingness struck me as odd. If you'll let me build you things for free, what's wrong with accepting my bread?
It's not the same. You're a builder. And don't think I'll forget any help you offer.
I tried to tell him I wanted to be a baker, but he was off on one of his rants.
We're warriors, and we're descended from warriors. We don't build. Now don't get me wrong, we have great respect for your craft. We just don't do it. Can't. With food, we may not like the work, but we're
I often lost track of what Abranus was saying when he went off on a rant. I suppose when someone doesn't listen to you, you're just less likely to want to listen to them. But whilst I wasn't listening, my wandering mind and eyes had given me an idea.
For measly crops, they've got another thing coming.
Abranus, I interrupted, do you think Clara would like it if I built stairs to her hut? The stairwell from the upper level of the Grumpy Village to the ground was one of my larger projects to date, just in terms of scale. I wanted to try and weave the path of the stairs through the waters on the base of Welcome Peak without disturbing them too much. Over the days I was a guest here, Abranus and I spent some lovely mornings together, surveying the progress of the stairwell and discussing the future of the village. Abranus was eagerly awaiting the return of their younger brother, Georgius.
When he does return,
Abranus said,
the village would need another grindstone. Now that Fergus is actually pulling his weight, too bad he's light and lanky.
Abranus laughed at his own joke. Fergus was still beefier than me, but anyone looked small when compared to Abranus. I had previously gathered a modest stockpile of acacia wood here, but used it very quickly, so was spending a good amount of time on the plains of the savannah collecting more. I took it upon myself to harvest the crops, and also brought in the composters. Fergus was right. They were just lying outside deteriorating. As I was removing the second one, I noticed an opening in the side of Welcome Peak. The cave looked even bigger than the chasm underneath my home. Fergus was bathing when Quinn arrived. At night, the merchant would drink an invisibility potion to keep himself safe, but on this occasion had used it to surprise Fergus as he washed.
For crying out loud! Can I just get 5 minutes alone?
Quinn was unperturbed.
No need to be sad, Fergus. I was hardly going to wake Abranus up. Just seeing if you're interested in parting with any of your hard-earned emeralds. Well, if you're selling a loaded crossbow...
I don't have anything of value on me, I'm afraid, I stopped myself from saying his name. I was uniquely privileged to know it. Fergus was too busy rolling his eyes to notice.
And neither do we, thanks to you.
Fergus had conveniently forgotten about our own trading, clearly still feeling sour that Abranus had given away their only diamond to me.
Ain't that a shame?
I was interrupted as I began to tell Quinn that I did have some of the finest bread he'll ever eat, when Talus's monstrous brain filled the still night.
If that thing keeps me up again, I'll find it and shut it up myself. Someone better do it, or there'll be trouble.
Fergus didn't get any sleep that night in the end. Neither did the rest of us, because we stayed up, talking. Quinn's demeanour was more relaxed once Fergus had set off, late for the day's work, now regretting his decision to skip bed, and the merchant's tongue was ever so slightly less tight.
You've been busy building?
That's right, I said. It's dangerous trying to traverse the mountain. I'm hoping this might help. And Abranus wants to expand his workshop for when Georgius returns.
Not here. I must have just missed you at your home before you left.
It's fortunate you did. I went on to explain in detail what had happened when the raiders extorted me, under the guise that I needed to return their stolen property.
So that's where they went. Considering how careless they are watching their own things, those pillagers aren't half bad at tracking.
I paused at what Quinn had just said. Wait, they were robbed? I looked at Quinn in the eye. By you? And you rode away on a llama, not a skeleton horse.
I reckon that pillager could have convinced himself that's what he saw. I suppose you can convince yourself of all sort of things, including thinking that it's all fine to keep the reanimated rejections from the candlemaker wandering round your garden.
I struggled to think of a way to respond. Quinn had somehow managed to steal from the raiders. But he was right. Anyone from the Grumpy Village, Lushville or Old Carlton that found out I was lodging the skeleton herd would surely be disgusted by me. Just imagine what they might think if they knew about Guest. I wonder what even Quinn might think of that. I really should get a move on, pal. As usual, I'd probably come up with something clever to say later on, far after the moment had passed. Damn, I should have told him about the hoof and udder. Whilst I was staying at the Grumpy Village, I tried to make the most of Abranus' tutelage in the art of battle, though he often repeated that I was
Just a builder.
He had no problem instructing me in the ways of combat, and it often fell to me to fight off the monsters that invaded overnight. So much for the villagers here being warriors,
Good practice for you.
he said. Abranus was excited at the power of my bow and told me that a well-placed sword strike to a creeper, after it's been thwacked with a propelled arrow, should be enough to defeat it. He taught me that the trick with skeletons is to get in close quickly. Zombies can be safely attacked from a higher vantage point, and the trick to fighting phantoms is to lure and trap them underneath things so they can't fly away. I employed these strategies as I ventured out up the mountain to check on Talus. The rock sheltered the skeleton horse against the worst of the wind and rain, but I felt bad that I'd left him tethered to a post, still donned in the heavy saddle. No wonder the animal had been shrieking at night. I told him to try and relax if he can, and turn the small hollow into a makeshift stable before I ran out of oak wood and said my farewells, promising him I'd come back soon. The nights were a bit quieter after that. I needed even more acacia wood to extend the smithy, and coal to smelt smooth stone in the fashion of their existing forge, which Abranus was kind enough to explain how to do, apparently very proud of himself that he was instructing a builder on building as well as fighting. And in turn, he was proud of me that I had chosen to venture into Welcome Peak to collect the coal we needed, practicing some of his techniques as I did, albeit with the entrance still in view. I was thinking about the story that Quinn had told us the other night as I excavated the basement for the smithy. It was Fergus that had brought it up, moaning that his village had fallen from such wealth and influence. But even though Fergus was 15 in the village when it had happened, Quinn seemed to know more about it than he did, and was the better storyteller. So Fergus begrudgingly let the merchant tell me.
It was about 35 years ago. An aristocratic woman walked into town. She had been fleeing pillagers that had attacked her distant home. All she carried with her was a locked chest that had all her remaining possessions in the world. Inside, she said, was a jewel so old and rare she wouldn't even let others lay eyes upon it. She insisted that the chest be kept under lock and key in their most secure place, which was a vault built with iron and stone.
Fergus had said the vault was gone now, just another thing that had been destroyed and lost.
The night she arrived, the aristocratic woman was so happy to be somewhere safe, she stayed up till the early hours of the morning, drinking with the villagers and charming whoever she talked to.
Getting my father drunk and sleepy, you mean?
Fergus had interjected.
Well, when the villagers woke late the next morning, she had disappeared, along with her locked chest and everything else in the vault, including the prized possession of your village, Fergus, the old king's sword, a priceless ancient treasure, one of the few things that survived the downfall of the ancient empire.
The memories had come back to Fergus.
At the time, no one knew how she'd done it. The door had been opened from the inside. I think that jewel the witch made us store away was a teleporting stone.
But Quinn had scoffed at the idea of a magical gem and taunted Fergus.
What do you know about that kind of magic? You don't know how she got away with it? You couldn't even remember the story?
Fergus was easy to wind up, and Quinn couldn't help himself. Abranus dragged me into the smithy basement the morning after I'd finished it to show me what he'd made in his new workshop. There, another golem stood, ready to haul coal, iron and stone at the whim of the brothers. Fergus was there too, donned in apprentice blacksmith attire, and Abranus was laughing at how poorly the old garb fit him.
That thing is a wee bit stinky.
Abranus was laughing as he talked.
At least I have the honour of wearing them and you don't. If you do somehow manage to stop being lazy, you might end up getting the oldest and smelliest of the clan's blacksmith robes.
Fergus had convinced me to sell him a lot of coal. I didn't know it was earning him prestige. Abranus told me that's just how it works with whatever job a villager might have. In truth, I was only selling the coal to afford Abranus's iron axes. For the first time since I'd arrived, Clara appeared to say hello. Where had she been? She was appreciative for the stairs and the smithy, but not as appreciative as Abranus, who firmly grasped me in gratitude. He smiled.
I must admit, I wasn't expecting your bread to taste as good as it did. We'll see you soon, laddie.
I walked up the stairs I'd built into the side of the mountain, towards Talus's rocky stable, ready for the next leg of my adventure. As I ascended the slopes, I heard a commotion below in the square. It looked like Georgius had returned from the never-ending forest, and unlike Fergus's attempt, he had actually found people willing to move into the area. As glad as Abranus would have been to have his younger brother home, he was never really on board with inviting other people to live in his village. I can only imagine the type of welcome he'd give them. A bit of my Scottish accent was definitely merging into Welsh at some points, but it's quite fun to do the voices. Well, I'm finishing this one late, so unlike Fergus, I'm going to bed. Thank you all for watching, and I hope you enjoyed.